All right. How's it going today, everyone? Welcome. Today we are doing our State of the Bird address presentation, whatever you want to call it, to cover everything that was covered in the third quarter. That is uh, July, August, September of 2021. So we do these things because with the we'll get into this here on the next slide. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So, what is the State of the Bird? It's a presentation to explain what's going on with the project. One of the reasons we do this is there's so much happening on the development end that under the hood, where like it's not obvious for people what's going on. Is the project even still alive? Stuff like that, right? Um, so what we try to do is we try to do these presentations so that people can go ahead and get an idea of what's going on, even though they're not seeing releases of Pidgin 3 and they're still seeing releases of Pidgin 2. And on top of that, it's also an opportunity for you, the community, to come in and ask questions about the project as well. So if you notice at the bottom of the presentation, it says if you have a question, type exclamation point ask and then your question in chat. And then after we get through the presentation, I'll be going ahead and answering those questions in the order that they were received. So, yeah. All right, well, let's get going here. So, let's talk about our retrospective. What happened and what's going on, or what happened in the past 3 months. And yeah. So, our last Day of the Bird was on July 8th, 2021. And our next one's going to be tentatively scheduled for January 6th, 2022. January 6th, 2022 will obviously cover the fourth quarter, being October, November, December of 2021. So we're actually doing pretty good here. We've got we've done all three for this year so far. Although if you are following along on YouTube, you may have noticed I just changed the names because apparently I messed them up last time. I had it the quarter that we were going into named as the quarter we were going into, not the quarter it was covering. So whatever. I went and renamed them if you're having any issues there. So all right. So retrospective for our infrastructure. Last time we mentioned that we had applied to renew our DigitalOcean credits for open source projects, but we hadn't heard back yet. That has been renewed. We will be using DigitalOcean for the next year. So our email is unfortunately still running at Wiktel. I've been trying to get it done in between things, but I just still haven't finished it yet. That's high on my priority list because I do not want to have this item on the Q4 State of the Bird. It needs to be gone. I told Richard originally I'd have it done by March 1st, and well, it's been 6 months since then. So like, I just need to get it done. I was hoping to sneak it out this weekend, and it didn't happen. So yeah. All right. Aside from that, we've moved all of our documentation, that's our API reference and all that stuff, from docs.pidgin.im to a single container running at docs.imfreedom.org. The old setup was something I just kind of threw together quickly to try to get our API reference documentation online. And what it did is it just CI/CD built containers and then pushed them, and then Kubernetes just routed based on a path. But now everything is just in one static HTML directory that's served by the server. So like the resource requirements on the Kubernetes cluster have gone down because there's only, it's two containers, the redundant containers, rather than two redundant containers for each API reference. So that's pretty huge. We just got that all fully launched up and finished up. I think Monday night we merged Talkatoo into there. So yeah, if you go to docs.imfreedom.org, you'll see the new site. You'll notice a big difference. The docs are still using GTK doc, and that's okay. But we're going to be moving to GI docgen in the future. So libgnt3 and gplugin and gplugin GTK3 are already moved. We're not going to do anything about the Pidgin 2 doxygen or the libgnt2 GTK doc. But the Talkatoo GTK doc, Purple 3, Pidgin 3, and Finch 3 will all be moved to GI docgen at some point. But right now, all the docs are in one place. They're easy to find, easy to deal with, and go from there. So yeah, we also added an additional node to our Kubernetes cluster because we're, like I just mentioned with all the documentation stuff, we're kind of low on resources in the cluster. And when we applied for our credits from DigitalOcean, we did ask for additional credits with the intent to add an additional node. One of the main reasons for that is we're starting to look at using Weblate to interact with our translators in the future. So right now, our translators, or we work with our translators through Transifex, except the problem is like a lot of things in the Pidgin universe, things have gotten neglected, and we're not like, how do I put this? I don't know any of our translators, and that's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but like they're gonna represent Pidgin in their languages that they're translating for, right? And I have no idea who these people are. That's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's something I want to have. I want to feel more comfortable with, right? Because right now it's just I don't know, right? So one of the ideas of going to Weblate is we'll end up hosting the translations ourselves. People will come in with their hub.iamfreedom.org account, and everything will be much more, I guess integrated is the word I'm looking for, but maybe not. But everything will be much more tightly coupled, rather than it just being Transifex. And Transifex is the other issue of Atlassian bought them a couple years ago, so who knows what's going to happen there. So, all right, but that covers up about everything for the infrastructure. So IRC. So in the past 3 months, Freenode, if you weren't following, went through some changes. I'm just going to kind of leave it at that. There's been a lot said and a lot done because of that. But during all that, we decided that we were going to open a Pidgin channel on the new Libera.chat network. And then we also decided to also create a presence on the OFTC network to complement our Freenode presence. That way, no matter what network you're on for open source stuff, you can find us, right? One of the beauties of working on a universal message client is for me to be in another channel on another network, it's one more window in my application, right? It's like I'm not running another application to go and connect to it. So it's not a big deal. But yeah, so with all the drama on Freenode, and due to our long presence on Freenode, we decided to keep the channel around until such time that we went 30 days without a support request. And today's the 30th day. So we're not fully shut down yet, but we're going to be shutting down that Freenode channel today. But just to give you an idea of kind of like what's been going on Freenode, that's the point it's gotten to, where we have gone 30 days without anybody coming in the channel and asking for support. But we wanted to leave that channel open for users to come in and ask support, because we've been on there for somewhere between 18 to 20 years, almost probably all the way back to when Freenode started. So for that entire length of time, people have known if you need to get support for Pidgin on IRC, you go to Freenode and you join hash Pidgin, right? But when all this drama went down, all that stuff, we changed our default client or default IRC server and stuff like that to Libera. So that's kind of like where we're nudging people, but we still have, all that tribal knowledge of where to find us that we wanted to account for. But now 30 days out, and you've got to create an account to get on Freenode now and stuff like that. And we're not too worried about shutting it down. We're still going to I'll still hang out in hash Pidgin, which will be like the unaffiliated, not the project thing. But we are going to shut down hash Pidgin and remove our official presence from there. So, all right, next up, summer code. So if you remember from last State of the Bird, we had 2 students this year. James Culver worked on the new history API, which is a key API going forward that'll help us add many of the new features like reactions, read and delivery receipts, server-side history, message editing, all that fun stuff, right? And I'm excited to announce that we merged this work earlier this week. So that's in. It's not complete, but it's usable, right? And that's the first step, is we got to lay in the basic functionality so that we can go on and actually implement all the fancy stuff like message reactions, read and deliver receipts, et cetera, right? So it's not even integrated into Fincher or Pidgin yet. It's just the libpurple layer that's there. But that all seems to be working all right, and everything's good there. And by default, it's using a SQLite logger to log to a SQLite database. And yeah, so we also had Pratik Pradeshi, who was working on a system to help us help users create accounts, make it easier, because that flow was kind of clunky. But unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, he was unable to complete his project. So we'll be picking up that work at some point, probably closer to when we're getting ready for alphas and betas of Pidgin 3. But yeah, so that's how the summer code went. All right, when it comes to Pidgin 2, released 2.14.6 on July 8th, and we released 2.14.7 on September 16th. There was nothing major there. Remember, Pidgin 2 is a maintenance mode. It's pretty much bug fixes. We're probably never going to see a Pidgin 2.15. We're just going to keep going up. Even if we make it past 10, we'll be 2.14.10, 11, 12, etc. Because that middle number means we change something in the API, and we're trying not to do that because we're trying to focus on Pidgin 3. So, but today we're going to release 2.14.8. Quick change log. There's not a whole lot here. But we're fixing a double free in XMPP and Jabber, which could lead to some crashes. We fixed a link in the support mailing list, or to the support mailing list in the help dialog that was pointing to the old site. When it was pidgin.im/CGI bin list, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Now it's list.pidgin.im. We missed it many months ago and we changed it. We found it and we fixed it. We're also fixing regression that I accidentally introduced in Pidgin 2.14.7. We haven't gotten a whole lot of testing on the regression fix, but I'm confident that this is going to be a good fix. And I just want to touch base. On why we changed the purple stir to time, because a lot of people are like, well, why'd you mess with this function? The problem was the Google OSS fuzz that we started doing when the bug bounty brokers came after us, or not bug bounty, when the exploit brokers came after us, was there was potential for a heap-based overflow in there. So I rewrote the function to avoid that. And in doing so, I missed a case that then caused the regression and so on. But now we've gone back and made sure that all the unit tests that were there passed, and then we made the adjustments, stuff like that. So everything should be good now. I'm confident. All right. So Pidgin 3. So first things up, we made a few big decisions that are going to affect the project that we're announcing today. People who are regulars on the stream and everything, you'll have a good idea of this stuff already, but yeah, so we're going to announce it today. So we decided that Pidgin 3 will not be using GTK 3 when it gets released. It's still using GTK 3, but going forward, we are targeting GTK 4. The number one reason for this is that it is absolutely trivial to build GTK4 as well as GStreamer on Windows and Mac OS with literally just a compiler in Meson. One of the things that was pushing us back so far with getting the Windows and Mac CI/CD builds going was getting GTK built in all of our dependencies. You're getting GTK3 built in all of our dependencies. GTK3 started as an auto tools project, and then late in its life, when Meson came out, they moved it to Meson. So but at that time, it was just like they were getting Meson set up for GTK4, basically. But GTK4, they set it up with all the sub projects and everything. So you can literally just add GTK4 as a dependency of as a sub project dependency of yours, and it'll just build everything that GTK4 requires. Which is super cool. That includes glib, that includes the graphic backend stuff. I can't think of exactly what it is. But so going forward, our dependency packages to get stuff started for these builds is going to be very, very small. But yeah, so we one day on stream we just compiled GTK4 for Windows on a whim. Like, I don't know, let's see if it works. I'm like, oh, it did. I'm like, all right. I think we're going to GTK4. Plus, it doesn't make sense to release new software using a library that's already in maintenance mode, right? And GTK3 is in maintenance mode. So, and using GStreamer is important because that's how we are going to be handling voice and video in the future. And we do intend to make voice and video a first-class feature in Pidgin 3. So, and then on top of that, we also kind of accidentally gave the Pidgin mascot a name finally, of Pidgey. I just kind of jokingly called it that one day, and it stuck. So yeah. So that's Pidgin 3 announcements. All right, then Pidgin 3. A lot has happened in the past 3 months, so trying to figure out exactly what we want to say is kind of hard, or what we want to focus on here. But one of the big things is we actually QLogic or Elliot went ahead and set us up to use a new Meson feature called dev-env, which, as you might guess based on the name, is kind of like a virtual environment for your Meson project. So what you end up doing is when you build the project, you just build it as normal and everything. And then you can, from your build directory, you can just say Meson space devenv Pidgin 3, which is the executable name. And with a little bit of work that we had to do, that'll make the program run from your build directory. So I don't know how many of you have done development in Pidgin or game in the past, but you'll know that like a lot of the time you ended up having to install to be able to do anything. Now you don't have to anymore. You literally can take a machine that has never seen our code, compile it, run it in the dev environment, and it'll work. There's some issues with icons yet. We're still sorting out getting them into icon themes and stuff like that. But the program, all the plugins, everything are just found. They magically work. You might remember a couple months ago now, I think, I published a blog post on Pidgin.im about my build scripts for Pidgin and how to run and stuff like that. Dev environment completely destroys one of those scripts. Just it's not even necessary anymore. It's just gone, which is very cool. And I'm realizing we can make it work with Glade too that way. We should do that. I have another script that lets me run Glade with the development stuff, so I can build out widgets like that from the dev tree. And the way the dev environment works, I can set it up so that if you run Glade from within the dev environment, it'll just work too. So I should make a pull request for that right after this. Yeah, actually, we have to release Pidgin 2.14.8. Then I can do it, but yeah. All right, so anyways, as I mentioned earlier, the native Windows and macOS installers still haven't been completed. But now that they're dependent on the transition to GTK4, that's going to kind of step back a little bit as we focus on the GTK4 port. Speaking of, that has also forced us to replace all of the deprecated API because we have to get rid of that to go to GTK4. We've also bumped our minimum GTK3 version to for Pidgin 3 to require GTK 3.24, which has some stuff backported from GTK 4 to make that transition easier. So after we get through the deprecated API, we've got to go and transition everything to the event managers, I think that they're called. I still have to learn a bit about that. And then we can actually finally start looking at the move to GTK4. So there's still a lot of work to do there, but now instead of just like, I don't know, we're just gonna compile on these and make it work. Now we actually have a plan, right? And the best part about the plan is the build system's gonna be the same for all of it, which is really so yeah. Aside from that, we're still modularizing the conversation window. This thing has been a pain to say the least. We've got it stripped down to nearly its bare minimums to help with that transition. Like the other day, we just finally removed drag and dropping of tabs to reorder them and stuff because the new conversation window isn't going to be based on a notebook anymore with tabs. It's going to be based on a stack with a list, so that way we can scale better and so on. So like the whole like drag and drop of the tabs was just code that was going to get deleted anyways. And right now, as you're trying to transition, it just makes things more complicated. So remove that feature, go on. We've been doing that with a number of things. I have another pull request in right now to, for example, remove all the dynamic menus in the conversation window because those all depend on the active conversation, stuff like that. And that's the part I'm trying to move right now. And as I'm trying to move that, as I'm trying to move that, that means I would have to then update all that menu code at the same time and everything. But the menus are also once we get the conversation management and active conversation stuff moved or transitioned, we're gonna finish moving the menus from the old deprecated menu code to the new menu code. So at that point, I have to rebuild the dynamic menus anyways. So why don't we just delete the dynamic menus? Because I'm gonna have to completely rewrite them anyway. So it's one of those things where it's like, you know, you're trying to go forward, but you keep hitting like little rocks and bricks and stuff. So it's like clear the path, move what you have to move, and then put everything back. Right. That's the stage we're in right now with the conversation window. So yeah. On top of that, now that the history API has landed, we've begun ripping out the old logging system. The old logging system is very, how do I want to put this? It was designed for a different time. The new history API is much simpler and it's intended to make logs easier to search and easier to delete and stuff like that. And query even, whereas the old logging system was basically built, or it was basically, so the old logging system was a rewrite of the original logging system, and both of those, their feature set was basically we're storing logs in flat files, maybe HTML files, and searching was just literally going through and searching for a string in that text, right? Um, so the new history API, it's not necessarily tied to a specific database, but it's meant to be database driven. So the new history API has three functions it exports. One of them are write, so write a message to the log. The other one is query, query messages from the log. And the other one is remove, which is to remove messages from the log, which is the same thing as query, except instead of selecting, it deletes them, right? Um, and that's the entire history manager API, or that's how you implement a backend for it. Is you implement those three functions. So by default, we have a SQLite history adapter that saves everything in a SQLite database inside your user profile directory. Whereas the old logging system used to have this convoluted directory structure that was like protocol type, account name, and then conversation, and then multiple files for the log. All that now is just going to be in the SQLite database. So like when you want to do a full text search across all of your logs, you'll be able to do it. And going forward, the history, so like in Pidgin 2 and previous versions, if you wanted to view your logs, you would go to the log viewer, and then you could just go through them, look at by the dates, stuff like that. What we're intending to do with Pidgin 3, once we get the conversation window to that point, is you'll just scroll back in history, and it'll just keep loading history out of the database, right? Likewise, the search window will then, update your conversation, or like, so if you search for something, it's in a conversation window, you click on it to see the context around it. That'll pop up the conversation window with it, scroll to that part in history, that kind of stuff. That's one of the big reasons to use a SQL database and to go from there. So yeah. All right. On top of that, the history API also contains a command line interface tool. In the future, it'll be used to support importing new logs, maybe exporting logs, stuff like that. Right now, it's just a simple tool, mostly used for testing whether or not logging is working. But the idea is a part of the removing the old logging code, we removed the log reader plugin the other day, which allowed you to import like old game logs, AMSN, and I could forget what else, other logs, into Pidgin. And like that technically worked, but like it didn't import them. It just added the ability to read them and make them work in Pidgin's interface. So like we've been carrying this code to do that, and it run. That means like all that code needs to be in Pidgin at runtime and the plugin loaded. So if you want to see the logs, and that kind of sucks, right? So what we're planning to do with the history API, or with the history, or with Purple History, that's the name of the cloud utility, is the code for that kind of stuff will live in there. And then, or maybe it'll live in a plugin for that. I don't know. We haven't figured that part out. But then the idea is that it'll just import it into the Purple History backend, whichever one you have selected, and then everything's just running natively, right? So you avoid that plugin, you avoid the complexity involved in that, and everything just kind of works better and does its thing that way. So yeah. All right, next up, setbacks. Surprisingly, we haven't had any real setbacks this quarter, which is, a knock on wood moment, because usually that's a big pain. So the exploit broker bounty that was on us got extended until the end of September. We didn't see any direct fallout that I'm aware of, and it closed at the end of September. So I don't know if they actually found anything. I'll probably never know until way later. But it looks like we dodged a bullet there, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Either way, we still have some work to do with Google OSS Fuzz. And we're going to continue using that going forward. There's like, it was a 2.14.6 or 2.14.7. We changed the way our fuzzers worked, and I need to actually update OSS Fuzz, stuff like that. It's on my to-do list. It just keeps getting bumped down, so it hasn't been updated in a while. So, all right. So what are our next steps? So here's what we'll be working on between now and the next Day of the Bird. Remember, January 6th is attended next time. Next Day of the Bird. So we're gonna finish replacing all the deprecated API we're using. We're actually the numbers gone down a lot. The vast majority of the deprecation warnings are in GTK Conf, which is what I've been trying to modularize forever, and I'm going to continue trying to modularize. And once we get that gone, that should get pretty much all the deprecated API. And then we need to figure out exactly what needs to happen to get us to GTK4. That's going to be the way eventing works with widgets has changed. That's the event manager stuff I mentioned in GTK4. So like we need to figure out exactly which widgets we need to update to that and that kind of stuff. Um, so that's kind of a bit of an unknown yet. But I'm hopefully optimistic that we'll either be very close to being able to use GTK4 by the end of the year, or by the second quarter state of the bird, or whatever, by the state of the bird to cover the first quarter, right? So within the next 6 months, I'm fairly certain we'll get to GTK. But again, it's Pidgin, so all bets are off. And then finally, we're gonna get the email to its new home on DigitalOcean. Like I said, that's gonna be like my number one priority outside of normal dev work stuff, because that needs to get done. That server is very old. That's running it. The main blocker right now is I just need to write some custom authentication scripts for Dovecot, and get that done. And then the rest of it should be more or less straightforward, I think. I don't know. I've been reluctant to work on that on stream because like it's credential stuff, but then I was thinking about it recently and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna open source it anyway, so why don't we do it on stream and then catch it that way? So sometime in the near future, we're gonna have a stream where we're gonna have a custom JetBrains or whatever development JetBrains hub setup, as well as a development Dovecot, so I can build a Lua script to actually make that all work, and then I can work that into Ansible, and then we can get that part of it solved. So, yeah. All right. So, on a more personal, so last time we did this slide about a more personal note about what's going on with me with funding and stuff like that. So, I have found some part-time contract work, which has been a big help. It's to help me make ends meet. If you remember from last day of the bird, my funds were going to were going to dry up last month, and they nearly did. But I have found some contract work. It's taken a modest impact on my Pidgin time. It hasn't been huge, like I said. It is part time, which is good. But it has made an impact, right? On that time, like I can't do as much because I have to work on this other stuff. But so whether or not I'm going to continue finding work like this in the future, I don't know. It's very uncertain, but for now, the dream of full-time or nearly full-time Pidgin development is still alive for now. So, all right. So now we come to the fun part of question. I see we got our first question. So anybody, if you have questions, by all means, please go ahead and type ask or exclamation point ask and ask your question. Oh, I just got a flip thing here. That. All right. So first question is, will the IRC way improve? Because as of now, I prefer Thunderbird's built-in client. What do you mean IRC way? And it depends what are you looking for IRC improvements. I mean, like we're looking to improve basically everything in Pidgin 3. But the time frame for it right now is kind of difficult. But so the real question is kind of like, what are you looking for? like where are the shortcomings, right? If you have something specific, I can speak to that, but I don't know where it's coming from. So you're not going to, like, you can just respond here in chat. But if you don't respond, I'm not just gonna sit here. I also don't have any other questions. So somebody has any questions? So, I guess I'll give you seconds here, but we'll see. Um, yep. All right, so I guess that's gonna be it for questions. Unless anybody else has anything. Um, if you want to follow up with me somewhere else, let me know. But like I said, it all depends on what exactly you're looking for. I can't guess what you're thinking is a shortcoming, right? Um, so like I don't know what you're looking for to be better, so I can't answer that. Not without some clarification. Boom. All right. So next question is, I already covered this. But when do you expect a beta? Don't know, and I'm not going to commit to a date. Um, I'm hoping that we can get the CI/CD builds in the first quarter of next year, um, and actually have them be somewhat used. Um, like Pidgin 3 right now isn't in a state to be used by anyone. Like I don't even use Pidgin 3. It's for anything more than testing, right? And that needs to change. The big reason why I don't is the conversation window is such a mess right now. And it needs to be modular, so it can be split up, and then we can actually get stuff going and get stuff finished, right? Um, and once that happens, then things will get a lot better. The bigger problem is that once we have a beta, we like having a beta of Pigeon 3 doesn't necessarily mean anything until all those third-party plugins start getting ported to. Um, and Pigeon 2 and Pigeon 3 are completely different clients. Um, if you heard me on late night, or I think we said this on late night, I don't remember if this got cut or not. Um, that there's over 2 million lines of churn between Pigeon 2 and Pigeon 3. That's stuff that got added, changed, removed, whatever, blah, blah, blah. We're only like 400-ish thousand lines of code right now in Pigeon 3. That number's been decreasing over time. Um, but like the amount of changes between Pigeon 2 and Pigeon 3 are immense. Plugins, there's a completely new plugin system. The way you create protocols is completely different. Um, most of the function signatures are similar, but the way you set all that up is completely different. So once we get it to a state where it's like, all right, like XMPP and IRC and other open source stuff that we have in the code base, once those are good and fine, then it's like, all right, now let's start porting over the other protocol plugins. And additionally, like there's still APIs that we need to figure out. Like voice and video at some point is going to get rewritten. I have some ideas for it, but there's much more important things like fixing the conversation window before we start looking at that. But the reason I mention that is any protocol that has voice and video support right now, like porting it at this stage, you just understand that that API is going to change before we get to an official 3.0 release. Um, so there's still like even after we release 3.0, there's still going to be lots of changes that'll happen after that, right? Um, and what we'll probably end up doing is we'll have a bunch of minor revisions for adding additional API and stuff like that. Now, what does that mean for the voice and video stuff? I don't know. It depends on where we land with all that stuff. But we're being very cognizant of trying to make sure that we don't get stuck in this development churn hell that we're in right now, right? Because one of the problems with Pigeon 3 is we've originally created the branch in like 2008 or something, right? Long time ago. And the problem was, since we were doing a major API breakage, we just kept piling on the stuff we were going to do in it, to the point where everyone just got exhausted and burned out because they never saw the light at the end of the tunnel. Hell, I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel right now, right? I've got an idea that it's there, but I don't know how far away it is. So we're being very cognizant to try to develop stuff in a way where we won't ever get stuck in that again, right? And once we finally get 3.0 out, I'm just spitballing here, but I wouldn't be surprised if we had Pigeon 4 in a year, right? because the idea is like we don't want to be holding back stuff behind a major version break. Like if we're ready to do a major version break, let's do a major version break and just continue, right? We let's not pile on stuff thing after thing after thing after thing. And then, 5 years later, make a release of it. That doesn't help anyone. It's a disservice to our users and everything. So it's something we just need to deal with and work from there. So um so yeah, long story short, I'd love to see an alpha by June. I realize that's 9 months away. That's roughly where we are. Will we hit that? I don't know. There's a lot of things that have to align for that to happen. And without solid funding, it's impossible to tell. So, all right. Next up, we've got question from, I thought it told me the question here. Oh, from Maui. If someone would say they do not like to use Pidgin because they don't know if it is more or less secure than clients from individual chats, what would you tell them? Like, does Pidgin have any security disadvantages? I mean, that's a tough question to say, or a tough question to answer, right? Um, we've never had a full blown like security audit, so like I can't say that for certain, right? But like proprietary clients don't typically have them either, or at least they don't make them public, right? So like it depends on what kind of security you're talking about too, right? So like most of the time, or all of the time, Pidgin is just a client, right? So like if there's something insecure at the protocol level, there's nothing we can do about that, right? There's a situation that happened a couple of years ago with the IM network Mixit MXIT. The Talos security group from Cisco went through and did, I don't know if they were auditing or just looking for bugs. Or I don't mean if they were doing like a full code audit or anything, or not necessarily code audit, but doing an audit of the code or what. And it turns out that they found a vulnerability in the protocol itself, and there wasn't a way that Mixit could fix it, so Mixit just shut down the network, right? Now Pidgin was obviously susceptible to that vulnerability as well because it was at the protocol level, but so was every other client. That said, that same Talos group found additional security issues in our implementation of the protocol, which is definitely something that can happen. But the thing about like the security nature of it is, with a centralized messaging network, that being something like your Facebook, your Discord, your Slacks, right? All that's controlled by a single central identity, whether it's Facebook, Slack, or I forgot the other one I just mentioned. So like a lot of exploits that you can end up happening in chat protocol, stuff like that, end up becoming if somebody has control of the server. And generally in a centralized chat network, people aren't going to get access to the server. That said, you could put on your conspiracy hat and you could say, well, the government's going to pay them to do this, that. Is that a possibility? Yeah, that's always a possibility, right? Is it actually going to happen? Do we have evidence of this? None that I'm aware of, right? But it's still a possibility. That's why people like stuff like end-to-end encryption and OTR and OMIO and so on. But like, is Pidgin inherently more or less secure than another client? I don't know that's necessarily possible to say. I mean, we've certainly had our history of having vulnerabilities. A lot of that is in specific protocol plugins, not necessarily the core library, but there still have been some there, right? But as always, we responsibly disclose. We will make sure that patches are out before the vulnerabilities are known publicly, and we're just going to do what we can to try to protect the users. At the end of the day, that's basically what it comes down to. Is your login data secure as in native clients? Does Pidgin have extra encryption anyway, local by the internet? So by your login data, are you saving your password? Because if you're saving your password, Pidgin 2 There's a long write-up on this on the old developer site, on our decision to store them in plain text. Um, Pidgin 3 will not be doing this. Pidgin 3 is actually going to use or integrate with password managers. Pidgin 3 by default handles stuff that uses libsecret, as well as K-Wallet and the Windows Credential Store. At some point, we'll add keychain access for Mac. We just haven't had a reason or time to do it yet. And I'm debating whether or not we're going to add our own internal keyring yet. Because like, I don't really like, should we have a keyring that saves to a file that's encrypted? Should we be responsible for maintaining that, making sure it's implemented correctly? That's the question, right? Will it be a good feature for users? Yes, but if I mess up the crypto on that, or if somebody implementing it messes up the crypto on it, are we going to catch it, right? And then at that point, we're putting the users at risk. But yeah, going forward, Pidgin 3, password managers all the way. Your credentials will be safe. They'll be stored behind your master password or whatever. But so for the second part of your question about does Pidgin have extra encryption anyway, local or via the internet? I don't know what, like if you're talking about messages themselves, there's multiple plugins. There's the Lurch plugin for XMPP that will allow you to do end-to-end encryption. We are planning on, or that's the Omeo end-to-end encryption. We are planning on getting that into the default XMPP protocol for Pidgin 3. But it's just time. Time is really what it comes down to. And we're trying to figure out how we want to handle XMPP in Pidgin 3 as well. And what I mean by that is our XMPP protocol was rewritten in 2000, somewhere between 2002 and 2004, I don't remember, from its original implementation. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. The implementation, it's usable, but the problem is it hasn't kept up to date on current ZEPs or XMPP extension protocols. So like it's not modern, right? Like so like it implements a bunch of the old and now deprecated specifications. And going forward, we're going to run into the same issue we have with like the conversation window and stuff like that, right? Whereas we're trying to move to the newer extension protocols, the old ones are going to get in our way. And the question becomes, is it worth trying to save the old ones or just move to the new one? And then the question, then the bigger question becomes, if we have to remove a bunch of the old extension protocols from it or proposals, does it make sense to just start over, right? And that's a question I don't have the answer to. It's something I've been pondering for a while, but I haven't actually dug in and looked at it yet. So I don't know. I don't know which way to go. But we'll see. But yeah, aside from that, there's also there's an OTR plugin which works on more than XMPP, I believe, but I could be wrong. Which also adds that's off the record. It adds additional end-to-end encryption and stuff like that. So, all right. Do we have any more questions here, or are we gonna wrap up here? So yeah. But yeah, so I guess we're gonna call it here. I may or may not be back on later tonight for the to do the 2.14.8 release. I'm waiting on pull requests right now. I gotta update one of them, but that's okay. But I just want to remind everyone again, remember you can get Pidgin merchandise like this shirt, among other stuff, at iamfreedom.myspreadshop.com. So, all right. Well, thank you everybody for coming by today. And we'll see you on January 6th or thereabouts for the next Day of the Bird. So, all right. Thanks for coming by. And until then, later.